My world was lemon polish and silence, until a billionaire's impossible demand forced me to choose: save his lost cause son, or lose everything. The scent of lemon polish and the cold weight of glass were my world. For 2 years I'd been a ghost in the Sterling mansion, a silent presence polishing surfaces that were already gleaming, dusting furniture no one ever sat on. My official title was head housekeeper, but in a place this sterile, with only 2 occupants, my primary job was to be invisible. Mr. Alistair Sterling, the billionaire owner of some tech empire that was constantly in the news, demanded perfection and privacy. I gave him both, keeping my head down and my opinions to myself. My university degree in child psychology from back home was a secret I kept tucked away, a relic from a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Here, I was just Elena, the woman who made sure the marble floors shone like mirrors. The only other resident was his son, Leo. At 12 years old, Leo was as much a ghost as I was. I'd see him flitting down hallways, a shadow with a slumping posture and headphones permanently clamped over his ears. He was enrolled in the most exclusive private school in the state, but from the hushed, angry phone calls I couldn't help but overhear, he was failing, spectacularly. Tutors came and went like seasons, a revolving door of stern-faced men and women with impressive PhDs who would last a few weeks before storming out, muttering about the boy being unreachable or, defiantly, lazy. One Tuesday afternoon, that revolving door slammed shut right in my face. I was polishing the grand foyer's centerpiece, a ridiculously large glass sculpture, when Mr. Sterling's voice boomed from his office, a sound that could curdle milk. "Get out! You're fired! I pay for the best, and you give me nothing." A moment later, a flustered-looking man with a leather briefcase practically ran out the front door, not even glancing my way. I froze, my cloth hovering over the glass. Mr. Sterling appeared in the office doorway, his face a mask of thunder. He was a tall, imposing man who wore his $1,000 suits like armor. His sharp gray eyes scanned the foyer and landed on me. For a terrifying second I thought his rage was about to be redirected my way. Maybe I'd left a smudge. "You," he barked, pointing a finger at me. "Elena, in my office. Now." My heart hammered against my ribs. I placed my cleaning supplies neatly in my caddy and walked on trembling legs into the lion's den. His office was a monument to power-dark wood, leather, and a wall of glass overlooking the city skyline. He didn't invite me to sit. He stood behind his massive desk, his hands braced on its surface, leaning forward like a predator. "Leo's grades are a disaster," he began, his voice low and dangerous. "He's failing every core subject. Another tutor just walked out, the 5th one this year. He calls my son a lost cause." He paused, his jaw tightening. "There are no lost causes, only incompetent teachers." I stayed silent, my eyes fixed on a point just past his shoulder. I had no idea why he was telling me this. "Your file," he continued, gesturing vaguely. "My security team does a thorough background check on everyone who sets foot in this house. It says you have a degree, education or something to that effect, from wherever it is you're from." I swallowed hard. "Child psychology, sir." He waved a dismissive hand. "Whatever. The point is, you have some training. These so-called experts with their fancy methods have all failed. I'm out of options, and the semester reports are in 3 weeks. I need a different approach." He leaned in further, his eyes narrowing. "I'm offering you a temporary promotion. You will tutor my son, every day after school. You have 3 weeks to bring his grades up to a passing level. All of them." I was stunned into silence. Me, tutor the billionaire's son. It was absurd. "Mr. Sterling, with all due respect, I'm a housekeeper. I'm not qualified to—" "You're more qualified than the fools I've been paying a fortune," he snapped. "I'll triple your salary for these 3 weeks. If you succeed, we can discuss a permanent arrangement. If you fail—" He straightened up, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "If his grades don't improve, you'll be looking for a new job. Do you understand?" It wasn't an offer. It was an ultimatum. I needed this job. The money I sent back home supported my entire family. I had no choice. "Yes, sir," I whispered. "I understand." My first session with Leo was that very afternoon. I found him in his room, which was the size of my old apartment. It was as impersonal as the rest of the house except for one wall covered in detailed, intricate drawings. He was sitting at his desk, not doing homework, but sketching furiously in a notebook, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't look up when I came in. "Leo," I said softly, "I'm Elena. Your father asked me to help you with your schoolwork." He gave a cynical little snort, but still didn't look at me. "Another one? How long do you think you'll last?" I decided to ignore the bait. I walked closer and saw his textbook pre-algebra was open, but the page was covered in doodles of gears and clockwork mechanisms. "What are you drawing?" I asked. For the first time he lifted his head. He had his father's intense eyes, but where Mr. Sterling's were cold, Leo's were filled with a deep, weary frustration. "Nothing," he muttered, closing the notebook. "It doesn't look like nothing," I pressed gently. "It looks like the inside of a watch." He shrugged. "It's just stupid stuff." "Okay," I said, pulling up a chair. "Let's forget the stupid stuff for a minute. Let's look at the homework." I pointed to a problem on the page. If x equals 5 and y equals 3, what is 2x plus 4y? And he stared at the page with a completely blank expression, as if I'd asked him to translate ancient hieroglyphics. He picked up his pencil, tapped it a few times, then threw it down. "I don't get it. It's just letters and numbers. It's pointless." I saw the wall going up, the same wall that had defeated 5 PhDs. I knew right then that drilling him with formulas was a dead end. I glanced at his closed notebook, an idea sparking in my mind. A simple, maybe foolish idea. "All right," I said, pushing the textbook aside. "Forget the numbers. Show me your drawing again." He looked at me with suspicion. "Show me," I insisted. Hesitantly, he opened the notebook. The page was filled with an incredibly complex system of interlocking gears, drawn with stunning precision. "Okay," I said, pointing to the largest gear. "Let's call this big gear X, and this smaller one here, we'll call it Y. If this big X gear turns twice, and this smaller I gear turns 4 times, how many teeth will have passed this point right here?" Leo stared at me, his mouth slightly agape. He wasn't looking at the notebook with frustration anymore. His eyes were alight with a sudden, fierce focus. He picked up his pencil, his hand moving with a life of its own, sketching, calculating, not with numbers, but with images. He drew lines, counted rotations, his lips moving silently. After a minute he looked up, a flicker of something not triumph, but simple understanding in his eyes. 22, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I smiled. Exactly. Leo. 2x plus 4y equals 22. His eyes widened in shock. For the next hour, we didn't open the textbook once. We translated every math problem into a mechanical system of gears, levers, and pulleys. He wasn't just solving them. He was building them in his mind, seeing the logic in a way the numbers on the page had hidden from him. For the first time, I saw a genuine smile on his face. He was so absorbed we didn't hear the office door open. We didn't hear the soft, expensive click of Italian leather shoes on the hardwood floor. We only looked up when a cold, furious voice sliced through the air. What in God's name is this? I'm paying you to teach him mathematics, not to waste time with cartoons. Mr. Sterling stood in the doorway, his face a thundercloud of absolute rage, his eyes locked on the notebook filled with what he could only see as meaningless doodles. My blood ran cold. Leo flinched as if struck, shoving the notebook away so violently it slid off the desk and landed on the plush carpet. The light I had seen in his eyes just moments before was extinguished, replaced by a familiar shuttered fear. He shrank into his chair, his focus fixed on the floor, trying to make himself as invisible as I usually was. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I knew my place in this house. I knew the rules. But looking at Leo's defeated posture, something inside me snapped. I had seen a flicker of genius, and I would not let this man smother it with his own ignorance. I took a small step, positioning myself slightly between Mr. Sterling and his son. "With all due respect, sir," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "These are not cartoons. This is his process. This is how he thinks." Mr. Sterling's gaze shifted to me, his eyes narrowing with disbelief. His process? His process has resulted in a 1.2 GPA. I pay for results, Elena, not for arts and crafts. He needs to learn discipline, to face the problem as it is written, not turn it into some fantasy. He did face the problem, I countered, feeling a surge of courage I didn't know I possessed. He solved it correctly, didn't he? Some minds don't see the world in lines of text and abstract symbols. They see it in systems, in pictures, in how things connect and move. Leo's mind is mechanical. He needs to build the problem to understand it. These drawings aren't a fantasy. They're a blueprint for the solution. And my use of the word blueprint seemed to land. He was a man who understood blueprints. A flicker of something other than pure rage crossed his face, maybe annoyance at being contradicted, maybe a sliver of curiosity. He was silent for a long moment, the air thick with tension. Then he strode over to the desk, snatched the pre-algebra textbook, and flipped through it with aggressive snaps of the pages. He stopped, his finger jabbing at a dense paragraph. "Fine," he snarled. "A word problem. No simple variables. It involves distances, speeds, two moving objects. A classic. Let's see your blueprint solve this. No drawings, just the answer." He has 2 minutes. He read the problem aloud, his tone dripping with condescending challenge. It was intentionally complex, designed to confuse. I saw Leo's shoulders tense. He was shutting down again, the pressure too much. I knelt beside his chair, ignoring the looming presence of his father. "Leo, listen to me, not him," I whispered. "Forget the book, just see it. 2 trains on a track. One train is a big, slow gear. The other is a smaller, faster gear. They're moving toward each other. The track is a conveyor belt. Where do they meet?" I didn't give him any more clues. I just translated the key components into his language. He hesitated, then slowly he picked up his pencil, his eyes unfocused for a second, looking at something on the wall that wasn't there. He was seeing it. He began to sketch on a scrap piece of paper, not the whole intricate drawing, but a quick, shorthand version. Circles, lines, arrows. His pencil flew across the page. He wasn't drawing pictures. He was thinking. After maybe a minute he stopped, wrote down a single number, and pushed the paper across the desk. I held my breath. Mr. Sterling snatched the paper, glanced at the number, then flipped to the answer key in the back of the book. His expression was stone. He looked from the book to the paper, then back again. He slowly closed the textbook. The answer was correct. He said nothing for what felt like an eternity. He simply stared at Leo, a strange, unreadable expression on his face. Then he turned to me. "This changes nothing," he said, his voice clipped. "This is one lucky guess. You still have your 3 weeks. But I'm not interested in your theories on education. I'm interested in quantifiable proof. In 2 weeks' time, Leo will be taking a battery of standardized placement exams at his school. Every core subject. I've already arranged it with the headmaster. If his scores are not, at a minimum, in the 75th percentile, your little experiment is over, and so is your employment." He turned and walked out of the room without another word, the click of his shoes echoing down the hall. The next 2 weeks were a blur. We were a team, working with a singular focus that bordered on obsession. We transformed his entire curriculum. World history wasn't a collection of dates and names. It was a vast, interconnected machine. We diagrammed the Roman Empire as a complex aqueduct system, charting its rise and mapping the cracks and pressures that led to its collapse. For biology, the circulatory system became a brilliant piece of hydraulic engineering. For literature, we broke down Moby Dick, not by chapter, but by the mechanical forces at play. Ahab's obsessive drive was the engine, the whale was the immovable object, and the crew were the gears being ground between them. Leo was reborn. The slumping, silent boy disappeared, replaced by an energetic, endlessly curious young man who fired questions at me faster than I could answer them. He wasn't just learning, he was inventing. He built a working model of a medieval trebuchet to explain leverage for his physics class, and it was so accurate he accidentally launched a tennis ball into the neighbor's prize-winning rose garden. He was laughing, truly laughing, for the first time since I'd arrived. His genius was like a floodgate I had cracked open, and now it was pouring out in a torrent of creativity and intellect. The day of the exams came. I was a wreck, but Leo was calm. He walked into that school with a confidence I'd never seen in him before. I spent the day pacing, cleaning the same spot on the marble floor over and over again. The next 48 hours of waiting for the results were the longest of my life. Finally, the email arrived. Not to me, of course, but to Mr. Sterling. I was polishing the silver in the dining room when he called me into his office. He was sitting at his desk, a single sheet of paper in his hand. His face was completely impassive. My stomach twisted into a knot. "Here are Leo's scores," he said, his voice flat. He didn't hand the paper to me. He simply turned it around for me to see. My eyes scanned the page, my heart in my throat. English, 98th percentile. History, 99th. Biology, 97th. And then, at the bottom, mathematics, 100th percentile. A perfect score. Tears welled in my eyes. I couldn't stop a wide, triumphant grin from spreading across my face. We did it. We had actually done it. I looked up at Mr. Sterling, expecting to see, I don't know, a hint of pride, acknowledgement, relief. But he wasn't looking at me. He was staring out the window at the city skyline, his jaw tight. "Impressive," he said, the words sounding hollow and cold. "The boy clearly has a knack for taking tests." He turned his chair back to face his desk, my presence already dismissed. "That will be all, Eleanor. You may return to your duties." I stood there, stunned by the icy dismissal. It felt wrong. All that work, all that incredible progress, and this was his reaction? Confused and vaguely uneasy, I left his office. Later that evening, as I was turning down the lights in the main hall, I passed by his office again. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear his low voice on the phone. Curiosity got the better of me, and I paused, listening. "Yes, the results were surprising," he was saying. "But it changes nothing. The plan is still in motion. He needs structure and discipline, not this. My father would have never tolerated such an unorthodox approach." There was a pause. My blood turned to ice. "No, he doesn't know. It's better this way. The car will be here to pick him up at 800 on Sunday. Make sure the staff at the academy are prepared for his arrival." An academy? My mind reeled, struggling to process the fragments of the conversation. Sunday. A car. The words echoed in my head, forming a picture of chilling clarity. All of this, the ultimatum, the exams, the stunning results, it was all a charade. He had already made up his mind. He was sending Leo away. My triumph curdled into a cold, sickening dread. This wasn't a victory. It was a final test before an execution. He hadn't wanted proof of his son's potential. He had wanted justification for his own predetermined path. For the next 2 days, I was a ghost again. But this time, I was haunted. I performed my duties with mechanical precision, my mind a storm of anxiety. Every time I saw Leo, laughing as he explained the aerodynamics of a paper airplane he'd just designed, a fresh wave of guilt washed over me. He was so full of life, so excited about learning, and he had no idea his world was about to be ripped apart. He thought he had won his father's approval. He had no idea he was about to be exiled. I confronted Mr. Sterling on Saturday evening. It was a reckless move, a flagrant breach of every boundary between employer and employee, but I couldn't stay silent. I found him in his study, a glass of amber liquid in his hand, staring at a portrait of a stern, unsmiling man that hung over the fireplace. His own father, I presumed. "Sir, I need to speak with you," I said, my voice shaking slightly. He didn't turn around. "I have nothing to say to you, Elena. You've done your job. Your salary will be adjusted as promised." "This isn't about the money," I said, stepping further into the room. "It's about Leo. I overheard your phone call. You're sending him away." He finally turned, his eyes glacial. "My son's arrangements are none of your concern. You are the housekeeper." "He got a perfect score," I pleaded, my voice rising. "He's not a failure. He's a genius. You saw what he could do when he was allowed to learn in a way that makes sense to him. Sending him to a rigid, military-style academy will destroy him. It will crush the very thing that makes him brilliant. What you call brilliant, I call undisciplined. he retorted, his voice dangerously low. My father built this empire from nothing. He did it with discipline, with structure, with an unwavering adherence to the rules. He would never have tolerated this creative nonsense. Leo needs to be forged, not coddled. That academy will give him the backbone he needs to one day take my place. He already has a backbone, I argued, tears of frustration stinging my eyes. You just refuse to see it because it's not a carbon copy of your own, or your father's. Can't you see the boy in front of you? Can't you be proud of him for who he is? Proud? He let out a short, bitter laugh. Pride is earned through strength and conformity, not through scribbling in notebooks. The decision is made. He turned his back on me again, a clear dismissal. You are very close to being fired, Elena. I suggest you remember your place. I left the study feeling utterly defeated. The walls of the mansion felt like they were closing in. Sunday morning arrived shrouded in a cold, gray drizzle that mirrored the ache in my chest. I watched from an upstairs window as a sleek black car with tinted windows pulled silently up the long driveway. 2 men in severe black suits got out. They didn't look like chauffeurs, they looked like guards. I found Leo in his room, packing a small bag. He had a bright, excited look on his face. Dad said he has a surprise for me, he said, zipping the bag shut. He said we're going on a trip, just the 2 of us. A reward for my test scores, maybe to that science and technology expo downtown. The innocence in his voice was a physical blow. My heart shattered. He thought this was a reward. He trusted his father. I didn't have the heart to tell him the truth, to wipe that rare, hopeful smile from his face. All I could do was give him a tight hug. I'm so proud of you, Leo, I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. I watched as Mr. Sterling led him down the grand staircase. Leo was chattering away, pointing to something in a magazine he was holding, completely oblivious. His father was silent, a stone-faced statue leading his own son to the slaughter. As they reached the front door, one of the suited men stepped forward. Mr. Sterling stopped, put a hand on Leo's shoulder, and knelt down. For one wild, impossible moment, I thought he was going to change his mind, that he'd seen the light. But he just adjusted Leo's collar and said something I couldn't hear. Then he stood up, gave Leo a little push towards the men, and stepped back. The light in Leo's eyes finally dimmed as he realized his father wasn't coming with him. His face fell, confusion clouding his features. Dad? Mr. Sterling simply nodded to the men. One of them took Leo's bag, and the other gently but firmly guided him out the door and towards the car. Leo looked back, his expression one of complete bewilderment and betrayal. Dad! He called out, his voice cracking. The front door clicked shut, cutting off the sound. I felt like I was going to be sick. This cold, calculated cruelty was monstrous. I ran to the kitchen, my mind racing. I couldn't let this happen. There had to be something, anything, I could do. My eyes scanned the room and landed on the trash bin. The cleaning crew had just been through. Lying on top of the pile was a discarded newspaper from the day before, open to the business section. A large picture of Mr. Sterling stared up from the page, the headline blaring, Sterling Innovations to Unveil Revolutionary Chronos Engine at Tech Expo. The Tech Expo. The one Leo had been excited about. Suddenly an idea sparked, born of desperation and rage. It was insane. It was insubordinate. It would not only get me fired, it could get me sued. But I looked through the window and saw the black car starting to pull away, carrying a brilliant, betrayed boy to a place that would break his spirit. I couldn't live with myself if I did nothing. I grabbed my purse and the crumpled newspaper and ran out the back door, my heart pounding with a terrifying, reckless resolve. I knew exactly where Mr. Sterling was going to be for the next 3 hours, and I was going to make him listen. The Tech Expo was a chaotic cathedral of chrome and blinking lights. I bypassed the main entrance, my housekeeper's uniform, and a confident stride getting me through a service corridor meant for catering staff. I felt a pang of guilt for the deception, but it was drowned out by the image of Leo's face as the door closed. My target was the main auditorium, where Alistair Sterling was scheduled to give the keynote address. The place was packed, a sea of suits and press badges, all focused on the stage where a giant screen displayed the Sterling Innovations logo. I found a spot near the back, my heart hammering against my ribs. On stage, a sleek, metallic object sat under a silk cover, the revolutionary Kronos engine. After a few minutes of corporate preamble from an announcer, Alistair Sterling himself strode to the podium, bathed in a spotlight. He looked powerful, confident, every inch the titan of industry. He began his speech, his voice resonant and commanding, speaking of progress, of power, of the relentless march of innovation. My plan, if you could call it that, was to somehow get close enough to confront him, to make a scene he couldn't ignore. But as he spoke, another idea, even more reckless, began to form. He was talking about the engine's complex energy recycling system, about how it was a masterpiece of efficiency, and on the giant screen behind him, a simplified animation of the engine's inner workings appeared, a system of gears, pistons, and energy flows. It looked familiar. Terribly familiar. It looked like the drawings in Leo's notebook. I scanned the crowd frantically. My eyes landed on a group of journalists near the side of the stage, notebooks out, cameras ready. I slipped through the throng of people, my mind racing. I reached one of them, a woman with a press badge that read, Tech Today. "Excuse me," I said, my voice breathless. "I have to tell you something about that engine, about the real designer." She gave me a dismissive look, ready to brush me off. "His name is Leo Sterling," I said, the words tumbling out. "He's 12 years old, and his father just sent him to a military academy this morning to keep him quiet." Her eyes widened with the predatory gleam of a journalist who smells a story. "What are you talking about?" "The design," I said, pointing to the screen. "That's his work. That's how his mind works. His father called them meaningless doodles." On stage, Mr. Sterling was approaching his grand finale. "The true genius of the Kronos engine is its predictive energy distribution," he announced proudly. "A feat of engineering so complex our top minds have been working on it for years." That was my cue. It was now or never. I took a deep breath and shouted, my voice cutting through the hushed reverence of the auditorium. "Ask him about the primary gyroscopic balancer. Ask him about its flaw." A ripple of confusion went through the crowd. Heads turned. Mr. Sterling froze at the podium, his eyes scanning the darkness for the source of the interruption. Security guards started moving towards me. "The balancer has a harmonic resonance flaw," I yelled, repeating something Leo had explained to me with frantic excitement just 2 nights before. "At peak operational stress, it will create a feedback loop and tear the entire engine apart. Leo figured it out." The journalist beside me was scribbling furiously. Mr. Sterling's face was a mask of cold fury. "Remove her," he commanded into the microphone. But it was too late. Another voice from the pack of journalists picked up the thread. "Mr. Sterling, is there a design flaw in the Kronos engine?" It was a feeding frenzy. Questions were being shouted from all directions. The spotlight was no longer warm and flattering. It was an interrogator's lamp. Sterling's composure finally cracked. His corporate polish peeled back to reveal the raw anger beneath. "That is a baseless and absurd accusation," he thundered. "The engine is perfect." "Then prove it," I shouted, as the guards reached me, their hands gripping my arms. "Run a full diagnostic, a peak stress simulation, right here, right now." The challenge hung in the air. The press was in an uproar. To refuse would be an admission of guilt. To accept was to risk utter humiliation. Trapped by his own arrogance, he had no choice. His jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle bunch. He glared at me with pure hatred as I was escorted out. But then he turned to his technicians on the side of the stage. "Do it," he barked. "Run the simulation. Maximum output." They dragged me into the hallway, but the doors were left open. I could still see the giant screen. On it, the animation of the engine whirred to life, faster and faster. Graphs and data streams filled the screen. For 30 seconds, everything looked normal. Mr. Sterling stood with a smug, vindicated look on his face, and then a small red light began to flash on the diagnostic panel. It was labeled Gyroscopic Balancer. The animated gear began to shudder. A high-pitched whine filled the auditorium. Then the entire animated engine on the screen turned critical red and exploded into 1,000 digital pieces, followed by a simulated system failure warning that blared across the screen. A collective gasp went through the auditorium. followed by a stunned, dead silence. In that silence, I could see Alistair Sterling's face. He wasn't looking at the screen. He was staring into the crowd, but his eyes were distant, as if he was seeing something else entirely. He looked smaller, older. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd thrown away his most valuable asset. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. The story was everywhere. Billionaire steals son's genius, tries to hide flaw. The stock for Sterling Innovations plummeted. I was, of course, fired. I packed my few belongings and left the cold, silent mansion that same afternoon. I didn't care. About a week later, I got a call from an unknown number. It was Alistair Sterling. His voice was different, humbled, tired. He asked if he could see me. We met at a small neutral cafe downtown. He looked terrible. They brought him back, he said, staring into his coffee cup. The academy called me. Said he'd dismantled the school's entire electrical grid in 6 hours trying to improve its efficiency. They said he was uncontrollable. A small, weary smile touched his lips. He's home. He looked up at me, and for the first time I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. You were right, Eleanor. I was so obsessed with forcing him to be a copy of my father, I never once stopped to look at the masterpiece I already had. I saw his brilliance as a defect. I almost broke him. He slid a thick envelope across the table. It wasn't money. It was a proposal. He wanted to fund a new school, a specialized academy for gifted children who learn differently. He wanted to build it from the ground up, based on the methods I had used with Leo. And he wanted me to run it. Today, 3 years later, I'm standing in the main hall of the Sterling Academy for Applied Sciences. It's a loud, chaotic, wonderful place. A girl is demonstrating a miniature solar-powered water purifier, and a boy is explaining the physics of sound using a guitar he built himself out of scrap metal. And over in the corner, surrounded by a group of adoring younger students, is Leo. He's 16 now, tall and confident. He's explaining the intricate workings of a small, perfectly designed robotic arm. It's a design that just won him a National Innovation Award. Alistair is here too. He's not the cold man I once knew. He's a proud father, watching his son with an expression of pure awe. He catches my eye across the room and gives me a nod of profound gratitude. He didn't just get his company back on track, he eventually relaunched the Kronos project, this time with a lead design consultant credit for Leo. More importantly, he got his son back. And as for me, I'm no longer an invisible ghost. I'm a headmistress. I'm a teacher. And my world is no longer about the scent of lemon polish, but the limitless, brilliant potential of a child's mind.